I'm BZ, and welcome back to BZ Watchdog News Network. Today we are talking about WR Utilities, the company that keeps showing up in Hubbard records over and over again. Not once, not twice, over and over. And the deeper I dug, the worse it got. Because this is not just about one contract. This is not just about one invoice. And this is not just about one city official trying to play dumb after the fact. This is about a pattern. A pattern where WR Utilities keeps getting city-backed work, keeps getting paid, and at least one case got pushed forward even when they were not the low bidder. And when you start laying these records side by side, the obvious question becomes, why does WR Utilities keep landing these deals, and why does nobody in Hubbard seem interested in the conflict staring them right in the face? Because what I'm about to show you is not normal oversight. It looks like insider access, repeated favoritism, and the kind of small-town overlap that needs a hard look from outside authorities. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, so let's get into it.
Tyranny, corruption, extortion. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
BZ Watchdog News Network.
Chapter 1. The Pattern. WR Utilities keeps getting city work. Let's start with the simplest point first. WR Utilities was not some one-time contractor. Hubbard's records show WR Utilities getting multiple pieces of city-backed work and getting paid again and again out of city-controlled funds. This is important because when officials want to brush concerns aside, they love pretending every deal stands alone. But this is not what the paper trail shows. The paper trail shows a pattern. It shows WR Utilities tied to a major $912,000 ditch reshaping contract approved by Hubbard in late 2023. It shows multiple water and sewer fund payments to WR Utilities in 2024 and 2025. It shows ongoing email communications and invoicing between WR Utilities and the city manager email account. And it shows a later city accounting record for $1 million mobilization payment to WR Utilities in November 2025. So right out of the gate, nobody gets to pretend WR Utilities was some random company that happened to stumble into one project. No, WR Utilities became a recurring name in Hubbard's records. And when the same vendor keeps surfacing, the public has every right to ask whether that vendor is being treated like everybody else or getting special access. Chapter 2. Jason Patrick recommends WR Utilities over a lower bid. Now here's where the optics go from bad to worse. On March 18, 2025, Hubbard City Council records show a meter installation contract was up for award. 4 bids were listed, and guess what? WR Utilities was not the low bidder. The records show Ratcliffe Utilities bid lower, WR Utilities bid higher, and yet the minutes state that Jason Patrick recommended WR Utilities anyway. Then the council voted to award the contract to WR Utilities for $98,600. Now let's be real. Even if Jason Patrick did not cast the final council vote, the records still show he was involved in the process and recommended the company that was not the low bidder. That is not nothing. That is not a footnote. That is exactly the kind of recommendation that deserves explanation when the same company keeps showing up in other city-backed work. And before anybody starts crying that the council made the final decision, yes, the council voted, but recommendations matter. Staff influence matters. Access matters. And when a city manager is specifically shown recommending one contractor over a lower bidder, the public has every right to ask why. Chapter 3. The $912,000 WR Utilities contract. Now let's back up to the bigger contract. On December 5th, 2023, Hubbard held a special called city council meeting. The minutes show the council approved a WR Utilities proposal for $912,000 for reshaping ditches to improve flow and drainage throughout the city. That is not a small side job. That is a major public works contract. And the supporting contract packet lays out the scope, the pricing, and the agreement signed with the city. So before we ever even get to the meter contract, WR Utilities was already sitting in Hubbard records tied to a nearly $1 million project. And that matters because, once again, this shows pattern, not coincidence. Not one job, not one lucky bid, a pattern. A pattern where WR Utilities keeps finding its way into major city-related work. Chapter 4. Repeated payments out of the Water and Sewer Fund. Now let's talk about the money. Because if the contracts were one problem, the payments are another. The checks and disbursement records show repeated payments to WR Utilities out of the City of Hubbard Water and Sewer Fund. Those records include payments such as $127,000 in November of 24, almost $80,000 in November of 24, $136,000 in December of 24, $105,000 in January of 25, $41,000 in May of 25, and almost $61,000 in June of 25. And then separate accounting records show a $1 million mobilization payment to WR Utilities on November 21st, 2025. So again, we are not talking about one isolated payment. We are talking about repeated disbursements, repeated invoices, repeated transfers, repeated city money flowing to the same contractor. At some point, nothing to see here stops being believable. Chapter 5. The Overlap Problem. Cody Weatherby, WR Utilities, and City Access. Now here is where the overlap starts looking like a real problem. The WR Utility Equipment LLC formation records show the company is tied to Brian Robinson, John Murphy, and Cody Weatherby, all using the same Hubbard address. So Cody Weatherby is not some distant name on the edge of the story. He is in the company records. He is in the email records. And the WR Utilities email packet shows invoices and communications going directly into the city manager's email account, including communications involving Cody Weatherby and WR Utility staff. That means this was not just a vendor mailing invoices into some black hole. This was direct communication with city leadership channels. And when you add in the public role overlap, you've already identified between Jason Patrick and Cody Weatherby in the same local power orbit. The appearance problem gets even worse. Now let me be careful here. Do I have a document proving they sat in a room outside a quorum and cut a secret deal? No. But do I have enough to say the overlap creates an obvious appearance problem and opportunity for private influence? Absolutely. And that alone should have triggered conflict review, distance, and transparency. Instead, Hubbard's answer looks more like, keep moving, keep paying, don't ask too many questions. Chapter 6, Hubbard's own conflict policy. And this is where Hubbard's own policy comes back to bite them in the ass. The city's conflict and gifts policy says city officers and employees may not accept gifts or free services from contractors or vendors that could influence official actions or impair independent judgment. Even more importantly, the policy says a member of the city council, the mayor, or an employee of the city shall not have direct or indirect financial interest in any contract with the city or be financially interested in the sale to the city of land, materials, supplies, or service. That is broad language. That is not some narrow little ethics clause. That is exactly the kind of policy you would expect to be enforced when the same names keep showing up around city contracts and city-backed projects. But when records were requested for conflict disclosures and related filings, the city's response was basically no records available in many of the categories where you would expect conflict paperwork if this town was policing itself seriously. So think about that. A broad conflict policy on paper, but little to no visible paperwork when the same contractor keeps servicing in the repeated deals. That does not make the concern go away. That just makes it worse. Chapter 7. Why this deserves outside investigation. And this is the point where this stops being just a local politics story. Because authorities should be looking at several questions here. First, Why did Jason Patrick recommend WR Utilities over a lower bidder in March of 25? Second, why does WR Utilities appear again and again in Hubbard's contracts, invoices, and payments? Third, were conflict disclosures ever required, ever filed, or ever reviewed for the people involved in these overlapping roles and relationships? Fourth, did Hubbard follow its own procurement rules and ethics obligations when dealing with WR Utilities? And fifth, did anyone in city leadership fail to distance themselves from deals where the appearance of favoritism was obvious from the start? Because you see the recommendation records, the repeated payments, the direct invoice traffic, and the ownership overlap, this no longer looks like random small-town business. It looks like something that deserves independent scrutiny. Not another back-patting explanation from City Hall, not another trust us, an actual outside look. Chapter 8, What Comes Next? The Gnarly Investments Connection. And here's the part that should really make people nervous. Because as bad as the WR utility story already is, it gets worse when you follow the same names into Gnarly Investments. But that is the next video. Because once you see how the same core people tied to WR Utilities also show up behind Gnarly Investments, and once you see how city money and land deals start crossing over, the story stops looking like repeated favoritism and starts looking like a full insider network. And that is exactly why I wanted to separate these videos. First, you understand the WR Utilities pattern. Then you see how deep the overlap really goes. So let's recap. The records show WR Utilities got a $912,000 city contract in 23. WR Utilities received repeated payments from the Water and Sewer Fund in 24 and in 25. Hubbard's March 18, 25 minutes show Jason Patrick recommended WR Utilities over a lower bidder. WR Utilities had a direct invoice and email contact with the city manager channel. The company is tied to Brian Kevin Robinson, John Jarvis Murphy, and John Cody Weatherby. And Hubbard's own ethics policy should have made conflict review a serious issue, not an afterthought. That is why this needs to be investigated further. Not buried, not smoothed over, investigated. Because when the same company keeps getting city-backed work, when a city manager recommends them over a lower bidder, and when the same names keep popping up around power, contracts, and access, the public is not crazy for asking questions. The public is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. And the more Hubbard officials act offended by those questions, the more people should wonder why. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this was normal contracting, or does this look like exactly the kind of small-town insider network that needs to be dragged into the sunlight? Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this everywhere, and stay tuned, because the next video is where we tie WR Utilities into Gnarly Investments, and that is where the story gets even uglier. I'm BZ, this is BZ Watchdog News Network. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I'll see you in the next video.
Tyranny, corruption, extortion. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
BZ Watchdog News Network. BZ Watchdog.